Everybody, this is Dream, and this is going to be the FanDuel breakdown today. We have a pretty good slate here. 7 games, starts at 7 p.m. Eastern. Overall, we do have an injury report we got to take a look at. There's lots of injuries today. So with that said, let's get into those. Before I do, though, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? I am talking a little bit lighter than I normally do because I have injured my chest, and that's why I've been out for a few days. I was at the hospital on Saturday. I have a problem there, so hopefully that gets better in the next couple of weeks. But while that's getting better, I'm going to have to take it easy on some of these videos. So I'm going to do the best I can. Anyhow, let's get into the slate itself. First of all, for the 76ers, Joel Embiid is questionable. He didn't play in the shoot-around, so we'll have to see if he ends up playing. If he doesn't play, that actually helps Melton quite a bit. For the Hornets, Rozier is doubtful, and if Rozier continues to be out, that helps Dennis Smith Jr. and Horford or Hayward and a couple others. For the Nets, Curry might not end up playing again. He's questionable today, so we'll just have to track that. For the Raptors, VanVleet is questionable. If he's out, that would definitely help Siakam and the other guards on the Raptors. For the Pistons, their backup center Durant is out, which should help Isaiah Stewart and should also give some upside to Nerlens Noel potentially in his first game. Grizzlies, Morant is questionable. Obviously, that's going to affect a lot of players on Memphis. For the Jazz, Kessler is out, which would make it a little bit more sustainable to choose Vanderbilt or something like that if he ends up being out. But if he plays, then that makes the Clippers' inside presence really hard to determine. And then for the Clippers, the Leonard is out, Wall is doubtful, and Covington is questionable. Obviously, we're gonna have to track the Clippers throughout the day because they do crazy things with their injuries and stuff like that. So we'll have to check later, closer to time. But assuming that those three guys are out, that's gonna help. Pretty much the guys end up starting. So with that said, let's get into the slate itself and see what we like at each position. First of all, for the guards, we have Reggie Jackson here. Now, Reggie Jackson for the Clippers, he's a little bit inconsistent because of the Clippers being the Clippers, and he's a defensive player, so he doesn't usually shoot the ball as much, but occasionally he does, and especially when there's more guys out, he definitely has a little bit more upside. His price point isn't super ideal here, but he does have upside in this matchup. Then we're going to look at Ben Simmons for Brooklyn. Now, he is Ben Simmons, but he's a little bit more consistent here on FanDuel because he gets some blocks and steals, and so that helps him more here. But he hasn't broken 10 real points in a game, or even 10. He's only had 10 rebounds, I think, once, and then he's not gotten to assist there either. So he hasn't really come close to a triple-double, but he does have some opportunity to do that, barring the fact that he doesn't shoot the ball that much. So, but he is getting a pretty decent chunk of fantasy points on FanDuel, so I do like him okay over here. He's not my favorite play, but still a decent one. Drew Holiday is still a little bit too cheap for his potential, the way that with Middleton out, and he's a pretty good option here on FanDuel. Not my favorite option again, but overall, pretty much everybody at point guard is a little bit inconsistent today that have good matchups. Then we're going to look at Fox for Sacramento against Charlotte. This is a nice plus matchup for him. He's been playing well, and I look for him to continue to play well in this matchup, and his price point is still pretty good. DeAndre Melton looks really solid today. If Embiid ends up being out, he'll have a lot of upside, even though his price point has come up a little bit. But otherwise, if he isn't out, then that obviously makes Melton not very useful. At shooting guard, Paul George looks interesting today at the price point he's at, but he has been extremely inconsistent so far this season. We're going to have to wait and see what the Clippers are planning to do with all their players today. If he looks like he's going to get 35 or so minutes, then he'll be a good play, but otherwise he won't be. But it does kind of look like at this point that he will be in that situation. Norman Powell has finally had some breakout games, and his price point is still pretty good for his production. Just be aware the Clippers are inconsistent with how they play minutes and stuff like that. Then Kelly Oubre is the boomer bust option for the day. He can get 40 fantasy points, or he can get 10, and so you do have to be a little risky with him. I don't love his price point, but he's getting tons of minutes, and he should continue that in this matchup against Sacramento. And then Gordon Hayward, he's been playing really solid, pretty safe play for Charlotte. He hasn't been quite as good here on FanDuel as on DraftKings, but overall, his price point is still pretty good, and he has some upside with if Rozier is still out. For the forwards, Keegan Murray is in a great spot here at $5,500. His price hasn't come up here yet, and he's now the starter here, and he should get plenty of minutes, and he'll have a lot of upside in this matchup against Charlotte. And then we're going to look at Scotty Barnes for Toronto, especially if VanVleet is out. He's going to have even more upside, but he's been really solid so far, with the exception of the game where he got hurt against Miami. He's going to play a decent chunk of minutes, and so I do think he's in a good spot here for his team. Then we're going to look at Gary Trent Jr. For Toronto, another guy that I like, okay, especially if VanVleet is out. So obviously we're going to have to check to make sure VanVleet is out, but if he is, he'll be a good play today. Then we're going to look at Isaiah Stewart for Detroit. His price seems a little bit too cheap for his production this season so far. He's getting a lot of opportunity, and Duran is out, which is the backup, so I suspect he'll probably get a few extra minutes in this particular matchup. Miles Turner seems a little bit too cheap, even though his price point is significantly higher here on FanDuel than on DraftKings. He does have 50-point upside, and this is still a pretty good matchup for him against Brooklyn, who's terrible against big guys. Giannis is super expensive, but he's been absolutely just demoralizing his opponents. He's only had his smallest game is 58.9 fantasy points, so it's just, even at 12,000, he's still a pretty good play, and there's plenty of value on the slate, and that might be a good way to fit value in if that's what you want to do. Obviously, if you want to go a more traditional approach, you can ignore him and then ignore some of the value plays. Then we're going to look at Mason Plumlee at center. He's been pretty good so far this season. The risk here is that Nick Richards has been playing well as a backup, and that's been kind of eaten into some of his minutes, but he's still a decent play at the price point he's at. Domantas Sabonis looks pretty cheap here on FanDuel, and he's been pretty solid. His floor is pretty good in the mid-30s, so I expect him to have a really good game here against a weak opponent in Charlotte. And then Jalen Smith, another power forward / center for Indiana. Now, his minutes are still good, even with Turner back, but his shots are down a little bit as a result. So we do need him to try to get a double-double to really pay off here, but he's still been playing pretty well so far this season, and he's a decent play on this bigger slate. With that said, there's just a lot of injuries to take into consideration today, so it's a little bit difficult to know exactly how those are going to play out. But I do think that 76ers and the Hornets and stuff are in positions where we could utilize some advantage with injuries. Same with the Raptors and also the Grizzlies if Morant is out. With that said, thank you guys for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.